Hello everyone. In these videos, we'll see the technical and economic impact of failures in photovoltaic inverters, one of the most critical elements in a utility-scale solar plant. Using real data collected between 2019 and 2024, we'll see why these failures represent a constant threat to energy production and the project's financial statements. The data show us a very clear reality. 43% of total failures in a plant are related to inverters, and these failures are responsible for 36% of the annual production loss. If this is not properly controlled, it becomes an operational problem that directly impacts revenue. The mean time between failures, MTBF, is just 1.65 years, which forces us to intervene with a frequency we cannot ignore. In economic terms, losses can reach up to €38 per kilowatt peak per year, something especially significant when scaling up to plants of tens or hundreds of MW. For those involved in maintenance, this means that inverters require very specific attention. They must anticipate with predictive programs, check the firmware, monitor the temperature, and watch for any deviation in electrical parameters. Poor ventilation, dust, or even the aging of certain components can accelerate degradation. That's why it's key to act before failure occurs. From a financial perspective, any MW lost due to an inverter failure translates into lost revenue, contractual penalties, and additional costs for unplanned interventions. In large plants, these effects are multiplied. However, investing in predictive maintenance and early detection technologies makes economic sense. In most cases, the return on that investment is achieved in less than 24 months. So, we're not just talking about technical reliability, but about protecting the profitability of the entire project. Throughout these videos, we'll see how these failures originate, what patterns they repeat, and what decisions can be made to reduce both downtime and the associated economic impact. Before getting into the specifics, let's summarize the topics we'll be covering. Here, we present the 10 key failure categories affecting photovoltaic inverters. This index not only summarizes the technical areas to be analyzed, but also structures the economic approach we'll take. It will serve as a guide for delving deeper into the most common failure mechanisms, their causes, their direct and indirect impact, and the possible technical and strategic solutions that maximize availability and minimize operating costs. In short, it's about understanding not only what fails, but also how much it costs to fail, how to anticipate it, and how to correct it with the best possible return on investment. IGBT and semiconductor failures. Critical failures with high repair costs. They represent 34% of power converter failures. They directly affect energy conversion capacity and often require extended shutdowns. Cooling system failures. These are the most common failures. Fans and heat sinks degrade over time or become blocked by dust, a hostile environment. Their failure can cause overheating and collateral damage. Capacitor failures. These are components with a limited lifespan, especially DC link capacitors and AC filters. Their progressive degradation can go unnoticed and lead to catastrophic events. Software/firmware problems. These include logic errors, system crashes, untimely reboots, and communication failures due to outdated firmware. At least 46 common vulnerabilities have been identified in recent analyses. Control and communication failures. Faulty control cards, interruptions in SCADA communications, or network protocol failures that affect remote monitoring and control capabilities. Grid synchronization. Untimely disconnections due to non-compliance with standards such as IEE 1547. These incidents affect system stability and may result in contractual penalties. Critical thermal management. Thermal management depends not only on the cooling system, but also on the internal architecture of the inverter and its passive ventilation. This is a cross-cutting factor that impacts the overall lifespan of the equipment. Production impact. This quantifies the energy losses caused by each type of failure. This includes both direct losses, inverter downtime, and indirect losses, partial operation efficiency drops. Time to repair, MTTR. This block analyzes the average time each fault takes to resolve and how that time affects overall plant availability. Mitigation strategies. best practices in predictive maintenance, smart sensors, AI applied to diagnostics, and emerging technologies are explored to help reduce the technical and financial impact. This organization will allow you to anticipate the most vulnerable and sensitive points within the inverter system. It allows you to design much more precise preventive and predictive maintenance plans, prioritizing resources where they are most needed. It also allows you to understand how certain faults are related to each other, for example, how poor thermal control can lead to IGBT or capacitor failures. This structured view also facilitates decision-making about what types of spare parts to keep in stock and how to improve availability through critical redundancies. Each failure category is directly linked to key economic metrics, cost of lost production, expressed in Euro MWH, which is highly sensitive to the duration of the failure. Repair and replacement costs, corresponding to direct technical OPEX. Indirect costs, such as PPA penalties, loss of agreed availability, or reductions in curtailment revenue. Understanding this technical financial relationship is essential for defining investments in mitigation technologies that have a reasonable and demonstrable economic return. Each of these 10 categories represents a key link in the energy and financial value chain of a utility-scale photovoltaic plant. It's not enough to understand the technology itself. It's essential to quantify its operational and economic consequences. Throughout these videos, we'll break down each of these building blocks, one by one, to understand not only why and how they fail, but above all, how much they cost us when they fail, and what we can do to avoid them strategically, intelligently, and profitably. We now move on to the executive summary, one of the most important sections of these videos. This slide summarizes the key aspects of failure analysis for photovoltaic inverters in utility-scale plants over the period between 2019 and 2024. It allows us to clearly and concisely visualize why inverters represent one of the greatest technical and economic challenges within the ecosystem of a large-scale solar plant. This is where both maintenance teams and finance departments must converge on a common vision. Understanding that technical availability and economic performance are not separate dimensions, but deeply interrelated factors. 40-3% of all failures recorded in photovoltaic systems originate in inverters, making them the most susceptible component to failure within the plant's balance sheet. These failures not only cause technical interruptions, but also have a direct impact of 36% on energy production, measured in undelivered kWh, directly affecting project revenues. The MTBF, mean time between failures, indicator reveals an average value of 1.65 years, which is equivalent to an inverter experiencing a failure approximately every 20 months. Even under normal operating conditions. The maximum economic cost associated with these failures reaches €38 per kilowatt peak per year, a figure that can quickly accumulate in large-scale installations. As a direct consequence, an average increase of 23% in O&M operating costs has been quantified, compared to plants of similar size, but with a lower inverter failure rate. The MTTR, mean time to repair, graph clearly breaks down the required intervention times by failure type. IGBT, power transistor, and capacitor failures are the most complex and time-consuming to repair, requiring between 6 and 8 hours of intervention, in addition to critical spare parts that are not always in stock. In contrast, software-related or cooling system failures typically have shorter response times, less than 3 hours, but occur more frequently and can trigger further chain of errors if not corrected in a timely manner. These statistics demonstrate the need to implement preventive and predictive maintenance programs, as well as a local inventory of critical spare parts and specialized technical training. Furthermore, efficient thermal management, coupled with a well-configured SCADA system, can anticipate failure patterns before they materialize, significantly reducing the number of unplanned downtimes. Here's a clear snapshot of the financial risk of not prioritizing advanced inverter maintenance. If we multiply the €38 per kilowatt peak per year by a 100 megawatt peak plant, the potential accumulated cost could exceed €3.8 million per year, directly impacting the asset's profitability. The 23% increase in O&M costs due to inverter failures has a direct and negative impact on operating EBITDA, weakening the project's margins and competitiveness. Based on these data, investment in predictive diagnostic tools, advanced digitalization of the control system, and firmware and hardware updates to reduce the probability of failure is justified on a quantitative basis. This type of analysis also allows for renegotiating O&M contracts, establishing availability bonuses, and developing business models based on guaranteed availability. These figures show us a clear and compelling truth. The inverter represents the operational and financial bottleneck in many solar plants. Only by understanding this correlation between the technical and economic dimensions can we design efficient strategies that combine engineering, technology, and financial management. In the next video, we'll go into detail about the root causes of these failures and how to anticipate them with modern analysis and control tools.